Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the Entrepreneur Spotlight Series, and we have a special edition for our show today as part of our Author Spotlight Series. And we have a great author on the show. She has a new book called Last Stop Before Heaven. I'm very excited to have Miss Sylvia Martin Vega on the show. She has a very poignant book that she wrote. It really touched me and my wife when we heard what it was about, because we've recently had some family members in a nursing home, and Sylvia wrote a book about love in a nursing home, but through the eyes of the character that we're going to talk about. But it's a great book, and it's really interesting how so many people have to deal with, elderly parents and grandparents starting to sort of come to the end of life. But before the end of life, some beautiful things can happen. And Sylvia wrote about that in this book. So Sylvia, welcome to the Entrepreneur Spotlight Show today.
I thank you, Andy. I'm very happy to be here.
I love to have you on the show. This is a very poignant and deeply human novel that really takes your readers inside the Florida Forest, which is a nursing home where life, love, and memory, quiet collide. Let's talk a little bit about the premise of the book, and then we're going to get into it.
Well, the book is a fictional nursing home, and just the many stories that happen within there. And it certainly is a lot of older people, but not exclusively. There are younger people in there that end up in nursing homes as well. Some of them mental health. Some of them just become injured. Spinal cord injuries aren't that unusual. And just how it becomes like a small city and how everybody interacts and the people that work there. And the word family can be overused, but I think in this case, I think you do form a family there.
Yeah, I love it so much. Of course, one part of the book, you've got Stella, a 103-year-old woman. And I think, maybe a little bit of a story comes about with Stella. Tell us a little bit about that and what you were thinking about when you wrote the book, thinking about Stella.
Stella is a composite of a lot of older ladies that I knew, and there isn't a typical old lady, of course, but a lot of them have what I call the seen it all mellow. They've seen it all, and there's very little that's going to upset them. And the old saying, your vision gets worse, but you can somehow see better.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great sort of thing to write about. Maybe that'll be the title of your next book. You have a shirt on that says, "I'm a writer, I dream
While awake.
while awake." I love that so much, and that's fantastic. And of course, when we think about what makes a life well lived, you have some good background and experience on that. You talk about that in the book with very, a beautiful warmth and humor. Let's talk about that. What really does make a life well lived?
I think the people. I think the people that you know and the people that you touch, the experiences that you have, and hopefully at some point you begin to have some wisdom. I feel I'm in my 60s, and I feel that I'm beginning to have some of the wisdom. And probably the greatest wisdom I feel is that everything isn't such a big deal.
Yeah, I love that. Let's get into the book writing experience, because obviously this is a wonderful book. I mean, you have so many different characters that you develop in the book, and then the characters combine and they have different stories intertwined within the book. How long does something like this take to write? And how did you write it? Did you write it on a word processor, or did you handwrite it, or on a computer, an old-fashioned typewriter? How did you write the book?
The original copy was actually written in the late 90s on an old Smith Corona. I started probably writing on a steno pad with pencil and paper, and on my days off, I would sit there and type it. And I don't remember how long it took, several months. But it was a story that was definitely in me and just ready to come out.
Wow, that's amazing. Have you always been a writer, or is this something later in your life that you developed and it was like an aha moment? I'm like a writer. How did it all come together?
I was always a writer. When I was a little girl, I used to write stories and act them out with my Barbie dolls.
Wow. And when you're writing, let's talk a little bit about it. How do you remember all the different characters and what was going on earlier in the book when you write the chapters later in the book? Is that something that's just in your mind, or do you have to keep notes on that?
It's difficult, and that's why this is my debut novel. I have written a lot of poetry and stories and things like that, but a novel is something different because, yes, you do have to keep track of it. You know, if somebody was born in 1947, you need to keep that in mind if you're now in 1997. How old is the character going to be? So a lot of back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, it's interesting, Sylvia. Of course, in the book, you called the nursing home the Florida Forest, I believe. And when someone goes to a nursing home, we've experienced this in our family as well. There's a lot of change when someone comes in, and even when a new guest arrives, there's a lot of change within sort of the walls of the nursing home. In your case, Florida Forest. Did you address some of that change in the book? How did you address that?
I think so. I think we covered, how some of the residents, I'm thinking of a particular one, she was upset because people that were Alzheimer's or something along those lines were coming in her room and going through her stuff, and she knew they couldn't help it, but it was still bothering her because those are her things, and here's some lady just going through them and walking off with them.
Wow,
So
yeah, that's a story that we don't want to hear very often. And not only do you do a deep dive into the people in the nursing home, the people that are getting the nursing home care, but you also talk about the people that are caring for them, the devoted nurses and the nurses' aides from their mindset, through their eyes. Let's talk about that because you had to have a little experience within this to really understand how they thought about that. So, where did that experience come from?
Well, I have been a nurse I'm retired now, but I was a nurse for over 3 decades. And I worked in a lot of different environments, a little bit of hospitals, some clinics, home health. I kept coming back to the nursing homes. Nursing homes, I think, have a terrible stigma. Not as much now, maybe, as they did 30 years ago. But I think if there was anything that I want people to take from the book, is that the people that work there are highly skilled and they do care for the
Yeah,
most
that
part.
yeah, they do, Karen. Of course, your book really unveils the raw beauty combined with what I'm going to call the bittersweet reality of aging. And the caregivers, I think sometimes we think of them, doing a job, but they develop relationships and companionships with the people that they serve. And tell us, did you sort of bring that out in the book about those companionships between the nurses or the aides and the people who they serve?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, family can be an overused term, but there really is a family. And nurses, we work holidays, we work weekends, we work during hurricanes. Um, so I remember one hurricane, I went around to my more alert patients and said, and they knew who I was, and I said, "Hi, I'm Sylvia, and I'll be your hostess for the hurricane." And
Hostess for the hurricane. That's good.
and we were together, all of us, for 3 days.
Wow. Incredible.
So
Yeah, like you mentioned, family. When we think about your character in the book, a character in the book, let's say, I believe one of the names of the characters was Ellen, correct? She was a nurse. Did you bring some of your personality into Ellen or some of the other people in the book, or did you stay away from bringing your own personality into some of your characters?
I don't think I consciously did it. But subconsciously, absolutely. I don't know how I could not have. And Ellen was a brand new nurse, and I wrote the very first draft when I was a new nurse. So, a lot of the frustration and the overwork and the just feeling like no matter what she did, it could never be enough. Um, that came from somewhere.
Yeah, it came from somewhere. And of course, when you pictured in your mind's eye the Florida forest, did you have any preconceived ideas of what that would look like, or any places that you visited that you sort of stepping stoned into the product of the Florida forest in the book?
The Florida Forest is a 500-bed facility, which is very large. Typical nursing homes are not that big. They're about 120 beds, although there are larger ones. But beyond that, I think it was a typical nursing home. There are a lot of stories that go on in there. Every room that you go in has had all kinds of things happen in that room.
Yeah, I know that for sure. We've seen it ourselves. And of course, Sylvia, The Last Stop Before Heaven. I mean, what a great title. I mean, that's fantastic. Was that title something that you had in mind from the beginning, or did you have iterations of the title and then finally landed on this, what I'm going to call a five-star title?
No, thank you. No, I think that was from the beginning because especially in those days, in the 90s, it really was mostly elder care. So for many of them, it was their last stop. And then, as time went on, we got more and more younger people, and some of them left. We ended up, some of them were there for a short time and got rehab and went home, and that was great.
Yeah,
But in the early days,
that's exactly right, Sylvia. And I was going to ask, when we think about it, and we think about you writing this book, and we think about all the wonderful characters in the book and all the lessons that they're learning along their journey within the book, are there certain things that you, Sylvia Martin Vega, as the author, are trying to get across? In other words, once somebody reads your book, is there something special that you want to have the meaning for someone who reads the book?
well, the one, as I mentioned before, that the people that work there generally do care very much. Um, and the other is that as long as you're here, you're here. It does not matter how old you are. And I have, the big romance in the book between Stella and Robert, and that is entirely possible at any age.
Well, let's talk about that. Stella is 103 years old. And how old is Robert? And just give us a little insight. How do they meet? How do they
He's
become kind
92.
of like fall in love?
He's 92, and he asked her, most of the nursing homes do have activities, and he asked her to a movie. They were showing Casablanca. And I guess he thought she was kind of cute, so he asked her out to go see Casablanca with her. And then afterward, they went out to the courtyard and they just started talking. And as is any love, it just happens.
Yeah, it's
You can't really
beautiful.
explain. You feel something for that person.
That's a beautiful story. They felt for each other. Age did not matter. 103 in the 90s, they found a deeper meaning. They loved the movie. They went out to the courtyard and they said, "Wow, maybe this is the love of my life." I mean, maybe you just never know. It could happen at any single age. And of course, I'm hoping they ate some popcorn when they were watching Casablanca. I know a family member used to go into the area where they had the movies and they gave them popcorn. And man, that was a wonderful time for the people watching those movies. It brought them back to the old days, going to the five and dime nickel movie theaters when they were younger with the popcorn and the butter and everything else. Now, let's talk about the next book because I know you're probably planning one. Are you going to do a sequel to this, or are you going to do something totally different?
I mean, I don't have any 100% set in stone plans, but I absolutely have enough stories in my head that I certainly could do a sequel. My my true gift, I guess you would say, is probably in poetry. Um, but I know that's a completely different thing. I also have a lot of short stories.
Wow.
So there's a lot of material. I certainly could do something else.
Well, you've been writing since a young person. Let's go back. Let's go back to elementary school, junior high school a little bit. Were you the one in the class that was always acing the writing and maybe had a little journal? Did you keep a diary when you were younger? Tell us about the evolution of the writing.
I don't remember ever not writing. And I credit my mother quite a bit because she would sit there and spell. I would ask her everything in the world, how to spell it. And she'd sit there and spell it out for me. And that was the beginning of it. I certainly had a diary. When I was in fourth grade, I was just so excited because my cheer was chosen as the school cheer. But I think that was the beginning of understanding that, I can write.
I love it. Writing is almost becoming a lost art because so many people are now not writing. They're going to chat GPT and the AIs and this and that. And we know from the research, Sylvia, that if you want to remember something or ingrain something in your brain so that you never forget it, once you learn it, if you write it down in a way that's meaningful to you, it's going to imprint into your brain. And we need more writers out there. And I hope that the young people really get inspired. For example, they read your book, The Last Stop Before Heaven. Maybe there's a young gal or a young guy out there somewhere where they get inspired, where they start writing because you've inspired them as a writer. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I love that idea because these days, if you see a group of kids, they're on the phone.
Absolutely.
Now, back when I was a kid, a long time ago, uh, you'd see kids and they'd have a little one of those old. They still sell them at the drugstores, and they'd have paper, um, the little paper envelopes that were easy to write on, and they'd have a pen and a pencil, and they'd write on the notebooks. It's been so long since I thought about a notebook. I almost forgot the name of a notebook. That's how bad I am on my technology. And they
There's so much else competing for attention.
right. So where do you think that goes? Do you think writing becomes a lost art, or you think there's going to be enough people like you and passionate writers to keep it going?
Well, I certainly hope so. On the one hand, I agree. Even I don't read and write as much as I used to because there are so many other things to compete for my attention. On the other hand, I think I read there are over 1 million titles being published every year. So somebody's writing.
I love it. 1 million titles. That's a lot of titles. And to break through, that's always the trick. But obviously, when you have a passion as a writer, that comes through. And your passion as a writer is really refreshing. A lot of people, they haven't been a writer their whole life. They sit down and they write their first book. They do a great job. Don't get me wrong. But in your case, you've been passionate about your writing, your poetry, your short stories for a lifetime. So this is a beautiful testament to take this beautiful passion that you've had and put it into a beautiful book that you're proud of. So tell me, when you saw the book the first time and it came out, what was that feeling like for you?
It was very exciting. It was different. I actually sat down and then read the book like I had never read it before. And
I
it
love
was
it.
totally different. It felt different. It looked different. Everything, I was so used to seeing it originally, and I still do have the manuscript, the original manuscript on the Smith Corona, or was it Corolla? I think it was Corona. Anyway,
Yeah.
and then of course on the desktop. But this just looked different. It felt different, and I love the cover. I'm so happy with how they did the cover. I mean, I would have picked that.
I love it. And we're going to put some pictures of the cover up through the interview. Of course, Sylvia, it's different when you get your hands on a book. Like when I read a book versus reading online, reading on my phone, reading on the tablet, when I get that book with that I order in the mail and I get that paper and the way it feels and the way that it's printed and the book cover, it feels totally different. It feels real. There's a fabric to the real book. And I think that's what you're talking about, which is why
Yeah.
so many people love to order this book and get their hands on it. So this has been great. I mean, what a great, great book you've written. We're looking forward to some type of a sequel, maybe a book of poetry, maybe short stories. You never know. You said you had a lot of additional stories that you're thinking about. We're
Maybe a
gonna,
short story of short nursing stories.
yeah,
That's a possibility.
that would be fantastic. And nurses have such a fabric about their lives and the way in which they communicate, the way in which they participate in the people who they care for and the bonds that they make. That would be fascinating. So this has been a great interview. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to put some links up to Last Stop Before Heaven. Sylvia, thanks so much for coming on the Entrepreneur Spotlight Show today.
Thank you so much for having me.